Going to do a really quick video here. Then I'm just going to run through some really kind of what I would see as key quotations for A Christmas Carol. Okay. Firstly, dead quickly about Dickens' life. You don't want loads of biography, but Dickens wasn't born into poverty, but he wasn't from a rich family either. Within his childhood, he'd seen kind of bad times. His father had gone to a debtor's prison, so Dickens knew the shame that came with poverty. And because of his family's struggles as a child, Dickens had worked in what was called a blacking factory, okay, putting labels on jars. As a writer, Dickens saw himself as a social reformer, somebody who could change society, and many of his texts focus on the plight of the poor, vulnerable, and needy. Okay, Dickens had a large family, and this sentimental idea of having a large family and everything being great, it's central to this text. Okay, we know then that the 19th century is punctuated by the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution changed Britain into a country of like factory cities. Okay, many children were forced to work in dangerous, laborious jobs for long hours for little pay. We're told the older Cratchit children work in the mills. The Industrial Revolution had made the city crowded, dirty, crime and poverty ridden. In chapter 4, we're told the ways were foul and narrow. We see people selling things that they've stolen and stuff like that. And the 1834 Poor Law had given people that constant fear of the workhouse. And we see this in Bob Cratchit. Scrooge treats him dreadfully, but he needs that job, so he can't do anything about it. Because if he doesn't have that job, his family are in the workhouse. Because remember, at the time, the government wouldn't support. Okay, we know the supernatural and ghosts are important. The Gothic genre was important in the 19th century. Okay, and the ghost story was really important there. Christmas spirit is another key theme. Before 1837, Christmas was basically just a Christian festival for prayer. Okay, in this text, Dickens says very little actually about the religious nature of Christmas. Christmas is more about celebration. Queen Victoria and her husband had started this tradition of decoration and celebration, and we see examples of changing Christmas in this. Feswick's party, Fred's party, and the Cratchits. They all show a Christmas that's a little bit like the Christmases that we know. Okay, and throughout this book, there seems to be a message that Christmas is a time for being close to those people that you love. It's not necessarily only about religion, it's about being close to those people who we love. Okay, so opening the text, few key things. I want you to remember this semantic field of the monster that's said about Scrooge, red eyes, thin lips blue, growl, sinner. All of those images imply the sense that Scrooge as a character is at best ungodly and at worst he's actually quite demonic. Pathetic fallacy is important in this part of the text. Okay, we see that motif of coldness run through. Okay, that cold represents the darkness and harshness of 19th century life. Okay, we also have fog as a really important motif. Okay, fog makes everything unclear and closed, and I want you to understand that fog is a metaphor or an allegory for Scrooge being blind to what's important, because we know that fog stops him from seeing, and we know that he exists in a dismal little cell, that's a place that's closed and shut. And therefore, the cell acts as a metaphor for Scrooge himself, unable to open up his heart and locked into a life of melancholy. Okay, we talked about pathetic fallacy a little bit there, and pathetic fallacy is the way that the weather is used to be parallel to the mood of the character. On a basic level, when Scrooge is at his worst, the weather and atmosphere is at its worst. When Scrooge is given redemption, we see it in the weather, don't we? A few key quotations then, using pathetic fallacy. In stave 1, we're told the fog and frost hung. Okay, so we've got that F sound alliteration, fricative alliteration that sounds really severe. Hung as a verb can be seen metaphorically. It's the idea that this frost isn't going anywhere. Okay, and it's much like Scrooge's mindset and mood, that isn't going anywhere either. And again, like I said to you before, fog can't see or feel any goodness. Also in stave 1 we're told that it was foggy yet colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. Okay, Dickens loves a list, and this list is personification of cold. Cold becomes monstrous, and this is similar to Scrooge's total lack of care for anyone in stave 1. Okay, it's getting foggier. That means that Scrooge is getting worse. He's getting blinder to what he's doing. He's becoming more selfish. And think about all these words: piercing, searching, and biting. It's all quite kind of painful sounding, and that links into the idea of kind of, Scrooge being a monster. Dickens forces us to see that this real cold temperature matches the kind of harshness of life itself. That's different to stave 5 though, isn't it? Golden sunlight, glorious, glorious. By stave 5, Scrooge can see the errors and what he's done, so the sky's clear. That when we think about that colour imagery of gold, and when we think about gold, we think of precious, valuable, winner. Scrooge is given another valuable chance to win at life, okay? And we see this beauty of the weather. I want you to think about this word glorious repeated. It sounds a bit like a hymn. The weather, and the way that Dickens writes, he makes it sound as though he's had what we call an epiphany, okay? He's seen the error of his ways, and he's seen the light. Okay, fire and light are motifs. Light is associated with truth, darkness symbolise being trapped. Okay, if you're asked about Christmas spirit, that motif of light and fire will be important. Okay, really importantly in terms of fire, when fire is big, there's hope. When the fire is small, there's little love. Think about that one coal fire in stave 1, there's your quotation. So that's part of the motif. Metaphorically, it shows that darkness is something that Scrooge chooses to live in. He isn't forced to do it, he chooses that one coal fire. One coal, numerical language, no light, no warmth, and that is symbolic of Scrooge himself. There's a sense that he brings his lack of holiness into the life of others. And we know that Cratchit's a warm man, and he's trapped in Scrooge's darkness and cold. So that very small fire and that one coal, symbolic of Scrooge and his heartlessness. Different to Fezziwig and Fezziwig's party, because at there fuel was heaped on the fire. Okay, remember, to heap as a verb shows that there's no stopping Fezziwig. It's rapid and there's this sense of abundance with it. Total opposite to one coal fire. I want you to, that's such an important quotation because it becomes a metaphor for Fezziwig himself. When he heaps, he gives everything to create generosity, warmth, togetherness and love, and that's what fire represents. And we know that Fezziwig's party is a time of abandon and happiness, okay? And it's seen in that quotation. This quotation symbolises Dickens' view of Christmas, okay? Make the fire big, make the celebration great, make everybody warm and together. It's just everything that Dickens thought. Fezziwig becomes almost like Dickens, an idealised view of Dickens in the novel. In stave 3, we're told that the fire is piling up its fires half chimney high. Okay, this quotation describes what Scrooge sees when the ghost takes him through the streets after visiting the Cratchits. Basically, in the present, everybody's together and happy. Piling as verb choice, abundance. Different to Scrooge in stave 1, darkness was cheap and Scrooge likes it. Okay, again, I want you to remember he doesn't do it by accident. He doesn't have no family because he doesn't have that opportunity. Scrooge chooses darkness out of choice. Okay, the link of darkness to greed and money or avarice, they're the things that define Scrooge at the beginning of the novella. Okay, Ghost of Christmas Past. From the crown of its head there sprung a clear jet of light. Still in that light motif. First spirit after Marley's ghost, the idea that the truth will be seen. When we think of a jet of light, we think of a lot. We can't hide anything in that. I want you to remember the Ghost of Christmas Past represents this idea that our past and our present are together. That the light of our past can't be dimmed, but everybody can see it, okay? This ghost sounds like a guardian angel, pure and biblical, okay? This ghost will allow Scrooge to see the light. We're back in Fezziwig's party. He heaps fuel on the fire, and we're also told it's as bright a ballroom as you would see. Okay. Remember for me that this Fezziwig's party, it takes place in a warehouse. It's not really a ballroom, but it might as well be because there's so much warmth and love. It becomes symbolic of that. A ballroom sounds grand, celebratory, special. So there's this sense that when people come together and have Christmas joy, it's a grand thing, okay? And I want you to think about Fezziwig's parties make it sound like a bit of a fairy tale there. It sounds almost dreamlike. Okay. Um, we also see this idea of a light that shone from the window of a hut with the miners. Okay, remember after in stage 3, he sees the miners and he sees the lighthouse workers and he sees the fishermen, people who were forced on the outside of society even at Christmas. And even light shines from them. A bit hopeful, eyes. Okay, Fred's all in a glow, and that links to the idea. He's got warmth and he's godly. Note that glow has those connotations. He's presented as glowing because he sees worth in life. He's the opposite of Scrooge's thin lips blue. Goodness shines from Fred, a symbol of the gospel. Okay, Tiny Tim's as good as gold in stave 3. Really importantly then, I want you to remember gold was a rare commodity at the time. It still is. And gold might as well have been magic dust for the Cratchits. They'd never be able to afford it. He is as good as something that it was impossible for them to possess. It basically says that Tiny Tim was magic. The idea that he is their value, he is their hope, he is their precious commodity, he is their magic. Okay? Tiny Tim's a good boy. He's presented as the honourable, respectable poor. God bless us. Dickens gives him a lot of biblical lexis or language, okay? And we see this idea that he's a child and he's still got the innocence and goodness. He's not a monster. And it relates to Dickens' sentimental message that children are full of goodness and they need to be nurtured and loved. Notice that Tiny Tim says, God bless us. He thinks about his whole family. He doesn't just think about himself, okay? And he'd be forgiven for doing so. He's not like Scrooge. He thinks of all of us. I want you to remember, right, that at the time there was a philosopher called John Locke, and John Locke said that people couldn't be born evil, they were born as empty vessels, or what he called tabula rasa, and it was how these young people were nurtured that made them what they are. Okay, and we've got this really key thing. Tiny Tim is presented as being perfect, and if we take John Locke's idea, he's perfect because we see that his parents are perfect. They're good and honest people, okay? Whereas Scrooge, we're told that he was a solitary child by a feeble fire in his childhood. Perhaps he's a solitary adult because he was solitary as a child. Namely, the way that Tiny Tim and Scrooge were nurtured makes them into the people that they are in the text. We talked a bit about the Cratchit children running, tearing, screaming, rejoicing, okay? All of these rapid verbs that are active shows the power of the Christmas spirit. These children are poor, but they come alive a little bit at Christmas. It also shows the power of the parents. The parents are successful in hiding their real struggles in order to present them with love, okay? The poor aren't monsters, they are good people. These children act like any children would act. They might be in poverty, but they're just normal. They're excited, they're running, they're tearing, and like I say, they're also rejoicing. Dickens reminds us that they're godly as well. However, in stage 4, we see the future where Tiny Tim has died and these kids are as still as statues. Okay? Rather than running about and tearing and screaming, they're silent. I also want you to remember in this simile that statues are grey. There's a lifelessness about them. Okay? When one part of the chain breaks, the whole family breaks down. These kids who were once full of life are now almost dead themselves because Tiny Tim isn't there. That's Dickens telling us the power of family. Don't leave anybody behind. Mrs. Cratchit then, brave in ribbons, that metaphor. We know that ribbons are cheap, but they're quite celebratory. Ultimately, this quotation is all about how she puts on a brave face. She offers a bit of celebration to those children of hers, even when she has very little to celebrate. And that's a powerful message. The poor aren't evil, okay? They're idols. Dickens wants us to idolise these people. Really important part of the text then, ignorance and want. Dickens presents the biggest evils of society as being ignorance and want. Okay, Dickens says the most dangerous thing are people who are ignorant of the real suffering of others, or people who we don't educate because they just continue in the same cycle. Dickens uses Scrooge as a symbol of the 19th century rich, ignorance of true suffering. And he presents these two evils as children to show that it's the vulnerable and the innocent who end up suffering the most. We've already seen good and golden children can be, but it's juxtaposed here with them being monsters. Okay, lovely. Few key quotations then from Ignorance and Want. Yellow, wolfish, ragged. Okay, that list emphasises the total depravity of these children. Okay, wolfish implies that there's something monstrous, unholy, and predatory about these children. Okay, that's significant. It preys on the vulnerable, and poverty's quite stealthy, Dickens says, and it takes over the vulnerable and innocent before we even know it. Where angels should have sat enthroned, devils lurked. Okay, juxtaposition: heaven, hell, and there's very little between them. Okay, there's something in this juxtaposition show how easy it is that the perfect can turn to something sinister. We've also got this word enthroned. To sit on a throne, Dickens presents the sense of royalty of these kids. Okay, lurked as a verb, sinister. So where these children should have been angelic, society has made them into devils. This monstrous imagery claws and cling to me. These children are presented as being animalistic. Okay, think about how they're the antithesis of those Cratchit children. The Cratchit family shower their children with love, so they're angelic. These children aren't loved at all, so they turn into monsters. I mean, that's Dickens' message, isn't it? The people in poverty belong to us all. Think about the Ghost of Christmas Present. What he tells Scrooge. Scrooge says, "Ghost, are they yours?" And the ghost tells him, "No, they are man's." This is Dickens' message. Poverty belongs to every one of us, and we have to take care of each other. Okay, they are man's. They are a collective responsibility, and that's Dickens' key message in this text. Okay. Lovely. And then we're back to Fezwick's party for the last few. My favourite part of this text, they made an orchestra of it. Okay, an orchestra, a place where everyone is involved and works together. Okay, we know that it's a symbol of harmony. Every instrument comes together to create beauty, and that's what Fezwick's party is. It's quite a grand image, that, making an orchestra. Okay, with a bit of love and a bit of togetherness, Fezziwig is able to create something of amazement and beauty. It's a metaphor of joy. They made an orchestra of it. Such an important one. That repetition of in came, okay, by anaphoric, I mean it's the same phrase at the front of everything in the list. So this is Fezwick's party. So in came the boys from down the way, in came the three sisters, in came the baker, This is the idea that joy only comes when everybody's together, power of unity. Fezwick's party is the representation of Dickens' belief that a good Christmas was a time for all and nobody should be left out. And like I've said to you early on, Fezziwig is the metaphor for Dickens himself. He's a good guy who respects and values the poor. Unlike Scrooge, who doesn't even respect his fiancée. What idols displaced you? The golden one. That's in stave 2, and that's our final quotation. This is Scrooge's fiancée to Scrooge. Remember, that's quite a blasphemous image. An idol's something we look up to and even worship. And this quotation is all about what we call avarice. Okay, A-V-A-R-I-C-E. The lust for money. Scrooge worships gold, and that makes him a sinner. This links to him having red eyes in stave 1. Remember, by the end, he's as happy as an angel, so by stave 5 he has changed. But in stave 2, in his past, we realise he's evil. Okay, some key quotations for A Christmas Carol there, really important.